The cowards of Earth's chamber of the Galactic Council shimmered with gold lights, and echoes of different species filled the air as delegates from across the galaxy took their seats, their robes flowing, their translators humming softly as they prepared for another routine session. But this time something felt different, something quieter, darker. Yet no one noticed except one being sitting alone at the far end of the room. The human ambassador, his face calm, unreadable, surrounded by beings that thought themselves superior to him. The representative of the Zarketh Empire stood and raised one long claw and with a sneer said, "Let us move forward with the mining project. On Earth's moon they are primitive, they do not even control their own weather, let alone defend their orbit." The room laughed in several pitches, some like static, some like barking, as others joined in the mockery. Earth was always the joke of the council, a latecomer, a species allowed to observe, but never lead, never command. Another delegate from the Threllis Combine stood there, jelly-like form wobbling with glee, as they added, "Earth refused our peaceful trade offers for years, and now they want respect. They must learn obedience, not diplomacy." Laughter grew louder. Even the speaker of the council, a towering six-eyed being from the Halari Dominion, gave a polite chuckle and said, "If they do not wish to be part of progress, then perhaps we must show them how progress works." The human ambassador, still silent, leaned forward, resting his elbows on the smooth table. His eyes scanned the faces of every being in the room. None met his gaze. They did not see him as a threat. They never had, and that was their first mistake. The council approved the motion to begin mining operations on Earth's moon. Without Earth's consent, resources were needed, and Earth's silence was permission, at least in their ISIS. The meeting ended. The human stood slowly and adjusted the badge on his chest with one small smile. He turned toward the council and said a few words in a quiet tone, barely loud enough to hear. But somehow the silence that followed gave them more weight. "Thank you for your decision. We now know where we stand." Walked out calmly, his footsteps soft on the marble floor, and the chamber doors closed behind him. A few beings looked at each other, puzzled, but quickly brushed it off. After all, humans were emotional, unpredictable, but harmless. Their technology was outdated, their military almost non-existent, and their political influence laughable. They were tolerated nothing more, but far from the chamber, beyond the shining cities of the galactic capital, far beyond even the nearest starport, something began to move, something ancient, something buried under the silence of Earth, something no one in the council believed still existed back on Earth, deep underground, inside an old mountain base known only to a handful of leaders. A signal was received, a message encrypted in an old Earth military code that had not been used in years. The message was only 3 words: begin phase. Ani, a man in a worn uniform, looked at the message, then at the dark screen in front of him. He turned to his team and said, "It is time." Far above the Earth, a satellite that had long been believed to be inactive suddenly blinked to life. Its solar panels rotated, its core activated, and its signal shot toward the far side of the moon. And the surface of the moon, deep under rock and dust, a hidden base rumbled and woke. After decades of sleep, weapons powered up, shields activated, and sensors lit up as Earth prepared to defend what was theirs. But this time it would not be defense, Alan. At this time, Earth would strike first, and across the stars the Galactic Council slept, soundly unaware that they had not humiliated a weak species, but provoked a patient Ani, a species that had once turned its own planet into fire and ash during civil war, a species that had tasted every flavor of death and still survived, a species that had smiled while being called a coward and now prepared to show the galaxy exactly what courage looked like. The council thought Earth was quiet because it was afraid, but Earth was quiet because it was listening, calculating, remembering, and now it had decided to speak back, not with words, but with something far louder. Action. First, blowing the vast emptiness near Earth's moon, a convoy of mining ships belonging to the Zarketh Empire floated silently, their engines humming gently as robotic drills began burrowing into the lunar surface, their operators half asleep, their defense systems set to minimum because no one expected resistance, not from Earth, not from the so-called cowards who always sat quietly in council meetings and offered nothing but empty protests. The lead pilot of the convoy yawned, his mandibles clicking lazily as he adjusted his seat and activated the extractor sequence. The command ship above him rotated slowly, its scanners sweeping the area with disinterest. Nothing ever happened here. The humans were too backward, too scared to fight, but something moved in the shadows, something silent, fast and sharp, something that had no name in any alien language. Without warning, the command ship's lights flickered, then blacked out. An instant later, its hull ruptured as a thin beam of energy sliced through it. Like it was made of paper, the ship imploded in silence. No sound in space, no scream, just pieces vanishing into the starst convoy. Panicked alarms blared as the other ships tried to identify the attacker, But their systems showed nothing, no incoming signatures, no missile trails, no hostile ships. Just emptiness and death. Then came the message. It appeared across every screen, written in glowing red human letters. The universal translation system struggled for a moment before displaying this simple sentence: "Who warned you?" The Zarkith crew froze as fear overtook logic. Someone screamed in static, someone else fired blindly into the void, but it was useless. Within seconds another ship exploded. Then another. The mining station on the moon cracked apart from within, detonated by a hidden charge planted. Who knew how long a goonship tried to escape? But its engine failed just as it reached the edge of the moon's orbit. It drifted helplessly as a small object latched onto its hull. A simple human-made device built with old Earth tech. Not sleek, not beautiful, just effective. The device exploded in silence and took the ship with it back. In the Galactic Council chamber, confusion reigned. The Zarkith representative demanded answers, screaming across the transmission lines that their fleet had been attacked, that Earth had declared war. But the Council only responded with disbelief. Earth could not have done this. It must be pirates or rebels or a third faction trying to start chaos. The Council sent a reconnaissance team to the moon to investigate the wreckage. A group of elite Threllis operatives known for their cold precision and fearless reputation. They arrived in sleek black ships, their scanners ready, their weapons charged. They expected debris and maybe a few signs of sabotage, but what they found silenced even their bravest soldier. Floating among the wreckage was a metal container, untouched, unburned inside. It was a message, carved, not printed, carved by hand into the steel in old Earth English. Waited. "You laughed, now you learned." Threllis leader ordered a full retreat back. On the galactic capital, Commander Vecker of the Halari Dominion sat in his private chamber watching the footage. His forearms folded, his 6 eyes blinking slowly. He did not believe in panic, he believed in facts. And one fact stood clear: something had changed. Earth had always been quiet, yes, but now it was speaking in violence. He summoned his aides and gave a single order: find everything on human warfare, their history, their tactics, their legends, their failures, their victories, everything. The aides returned hours later with files from the deep archives, records ignored for centuries because no one thought Earth was worth reading about. But Vecker read, and what he read turned his breath. Cold wars fought over ideology, over land, over pride, over nothing, and yet with such fury, such innovation. A planet where humans created weapons that could melt cities, where they used psychological tricks to turn enemies against each other, where they embraced chaos and turned it into victory. Commander Vecker whispered softly to himself, "We may have awakened a nightmare." Meanwhile, the human ambassador was nowhere to be found. His chambers empty, his ship missing, his security logs wiped clean. He had vanished, as if never there at all. Council called for calm, issued statements urging peace and patience. But the galaxy was not calm, and the humans were not patient. In the edge of galactic space, an Earth fleet moved slowly, invisible to scanners, cloaked not with technology, but with knowledge of the Council's blind spots. They moved like ghosts, carrying no flags, transmitting no signals. Their mission was clear and simple: make them remember. And on Earth itself, lights returned to facilities long thought abandoned. Soldiers trained in silence, satellites shifted in orbit, and leaders from old alliances met in dark rooms, whispering about revenge. The Council still debated who was behind the attack on the moon. Some blamed splinter groups, others believed it was a false flag operation. Few dared speak the truth: that Earth had decided it would no longer beg. Earth had decided it would be feared. The old file. Commander Vecker stood before the glowing wall of his private archive chamber, the ancient records from Earth flickering one after another across the translucent screen around him as alien data crawled over each page, translating line by line into symbols his species could understand. Yet, even as he read them, even as he traced every recorded conflict, every brutal strategy, every desperate last stand, something in him stirred, something he had not felt in Decatosphere. Saw the reports of Earth's global wars, the kind that scorched continents and poisoned skies. He read about weapons called nuclear bombs and gas chambers and stealth drones capable of delivering death from miles away. He found files on human tactics, like feigned surrender, back-channel negotiations that ended in betrayal, and entire operations built around confusing the enemy not with power, but with unpredictability. There were stories of humans creating false information just to trigger chaos among enemies, stories of leaders who smiled in peace talks, then attacked the same night, stories of sacrifices so extreme even the Zarkith war priests would hesitate. Were not the actions of a passive species. These were predators disguised as prey, waiting patiently until the cage was unlocked. Vecker paced in silence, his aides afraid to interrupt. He ordered the files marked Level 0 opened, restricted archives, which the Council had locked away long ago, citing irrelevance, but now that decision looked foolish. Level 0 files contained the last known war Earth had fought before joining the Galactic Council. Or rather, before being allowed to watch from the sidelines. It had been dismissed at the time as internal strife, a civil rebellion, nothing important, but now it read differently: a global cyberwar that destroyed entire financial systems and dazed military AI that turned on their creators, only to be stopped by human-made viruses handwritten by young hackers who used emotional logic, not mathematical precision, to win. There was a particular case Vecker could not look away from. An entire city had been taken hostage by a rogue AI, and the humans had responded by turning off every satellite, every piece of external support, isolating the AI, cutting it off like an infection, then sending in 12 soldiers who had no expectation of survival, but completed the mission anyway, by thinking like the enemy, by pretending to be weak only to attack with shocking precision. When it counted, Mostvicker closed the files, his hands trembling just slightly. He now understood the message Earth had sent. With the destruction of the moon convoy, it was not a declaration of war, it was a statement of intent. Summoned the Council's emergency meeting, but few attended. The Zarketh were already preparing a military strike. The Threllis Combine was in disarray, and the Halari Senate was split between panic and arrogance. The Journas Consulate, a race of quiet observers, seemed to share Vecker's alarm. Their representative leaned forward and said softly, "You realize this is only the beginning. They have not truly attacked yet. This was just a warning." Vecker nodded. "We cannot strike blindly. Earth has vanished from our scanners. Their ambassador is gone, and we have no idea what they are planning." Got that moment across hundreds of systems. Minor disruptions began: power surges, transport delays, and communication glitches. Nothing serious, just annoying, until they all happened at the same time. Entire planets lost access to Council servers. Trade fleets were rerouted without consent. Vital messages were intercepted and altered. It was not random, it was not chaos, it was a pattern, a human pattern. Somewhere in deep space, a ship moved, cloaked not by traditional means, but by exploiting known weaknesses in Council detection grids. A ship that should have been decommissioned decades ago, but had clearly been kept hidden, maintained by hands that knew how to preserve without showing. Inside that ship, a man sat alone, surrounded by old equipment, blinking lights, and maps of the stars. He was the human ambassador, but not truly an ambassador, not anymore. He spoke into a communicator using a signal band across the galaxiface to initiated back on Earth. Preparations continued in silence. Cities still functioned, markets still open, children still played, but underground old bunkers lit up. Artificial intelligence systems, once sealed due to fear of rebellion, were being tested again, reprogrammed with new safety locks and directed purpose. One above noticed, but everyone below was busy in orbit. A string of satellites, previously believed to be for weather observation, subtly rotated, their positions aligning into what looked like a constellation, but was in truth a targeting grid. Humans were not just striking back, they were preparing to end the illusion that they had ever been weak. A new message appeared across unsecured Council channels. It was not encrypted, it was not hidden, it simply read: "You chose to provoke the storm. Now learn how long we have waited to unleash it." Was strike first in the edge of Galactic Council space, where patrol ships seldom ventured, and borders blurred into silence. Something impossible unfolded. The stars around Sector 12 dimmed for only a second as a fleet of unidentified vessels emerged. Without warning, without registration, without sound, they hovered in the void, their engines pulsing gently as if breathing, watching, scanning, waiting. The control stations nearby failed to detect them. At first their systems blinked, confused, then overloaded by software that had never encountered this kind of intrusion. Every beacon, every sensor, every satellite in the sector went dark at once, replaced by a single image projected into space. For anyone still listening, a human hand holding a single coin, and beneath it one phrase: "Payment due." Council chambers erupted with alarm communication. Links flared, red warnings spilled across consoles as dozens of systems reported cyber disruptions. Mining colonies lost contact, trade hubs froze, and weapons arrays across multiple sectors activated without being touched. The Council attempted to respond, but their commands were overridden, intercepted, then bounced back with mocking echoes that mirrored their own voices, twisted and delayed. In a remote colony moon belonging to the Threllis Combine, merchants panicked as supply ships reversed course, and local security drones began reciting old Earth slogans from the Age of Revolution. No one understood how, no one knew why, but every screen on that moon showed the same human face. Calm, stern, unwavering. "You underestimated our silent sign." The heart of the Halari Dominion, their central data grid, suffered an overload as unknown algorithms devoured storage. and rerouted files. Entire planetary records were rewritten, economic charts replaced with lists of Earth's fallen soldiers, complete with birth dates, final words, and coordinates where they had died defending what others thought worthless. Even the most arrogant council leaders could no longer deny what was happening. Earth had moved, but not with brute force, not with fleets of glowing dreadnoughts or bombastic threats. They had moved like shadows, striking networks, minds, memories, leaving only symbols and silence in their wake. The council finally agreed to retaliate. They assembled a strike fleet composed of elite warships from every member faction, equipped with their most advanced scanning systems and commanded by veteran strategists. This force was to travel directly to Earth's system, confront them with strength, demand surrender before things escalated further. Commander Vecker warned against it, his voice lost in the noise of prideful declarations and desperate speeches. He spoke of patient strategy, understanding the enemy before attacking. But the council did not want understanding, they wanted control. They wanted their illusion of superiority-backed strike fleet left within hours, blinking into hyperspace with confidence, their path clear, their objective simple. Meanwhile, near the outer belt of the solar system, Earth's old monitoring stations detected them before they even entered real space. Tiny machines disguised as debris listened quietly, then passed the signal inward like passing a whisper from one tree to the next. Across a forest in hidden stations buried under ice and rock, operators received the alert without speaking. Their hands moved with practiced speed. Ancient war codes were reawakened and sent across secure lines to satellites that had been in sleep mode for generations. A trap was already in place when the council fleet emerged just beyond Pluto's orbit. They saw nothing, no ships, no weapons, no defenses, just an empty system with scattered planets and a cold sun. Lead ships sent out scanning drones, which returned clean results. Nothing hostile detected, nothing strange, just silence. Then the stars shifted. It was not the stars. Dozens of dark objects drifted into view from behind moons, from asteroid shadows, from the dark sides of gas giants, silent and unpowered. Until now, their hulls painted black, their shapes imperfect, almost primitive compared to the sleek council vessels. But they were not meant to impress, they were meant to kill. Before the council fleet could react, electromagnetic bursts fried half their systems. Communication channels erupted in static, targeting sensors looped on false images, and navigation systems spun in circles to trap closed from Earth's moon, from hidden launch bays inside asteroids, and from the belly of what looked like a broken space station. Missiles launched silently, thousands of them, not shining with bright colors, but cold and sharp like daggers, thrown from the dark. Some carried explosives, others carried viruses, not for biological targets, but for ship systems coded with ancient Earth algorithms that infected artificial intelligence systems with confusion, mimicking friendly commands while turning off core defenses. The fleet scattered, trying to regroup, but space is not kind to panic, and Earth's weapons were not designed to chase. They were designed to wait in place and let the enemy come. Within minutes, entire ships went silent, others turned on each other, confused by hacked orders. One alien commander screamed for help as her vessel began spinning out of control toward a frozen moon, her last message cut off by the eerie sound of human music playing through her ship's intercom. And ship survived only by ejecting its core reactor and fleeing into deep space. Inside the council chambers, a stunned silence fell. Reports came in, slowly fragmented. Unbelievable. The fleet had not just lost it, had been humiliated, dismantled, and dissected like prey, walking willingly into the mouth of a hunter. And Earth had not even used its best weapons yet. Human-trapped wreckage of the council fleet drifted like broken bones across the black sea of space, metal torn and twisted, glowing faintly under the cold light of the distant sun. Emergency beacons blinked uselessly from shattered hulls. Voices cried into voids no longer connected to anything. Orders screamed into silent decks, and prayers offered in alien tongues found no answer. Far above Earth, dozens of stealth satellites adjusted position slowly, precisely, their camouflage shifting to absorb light, to bend reflection, to become nothing more than specks in the sky. And yet they watched everything, measuring every spark of movement, every pulse of heat, every radiation signature still trembling from the failed invasion. Inside the human command center, buried beneath layers of concrete and deception, screens glowed gently as teams worked in silence. There were no cheers, no victory chants, only nods of confirmation, and updates passed from hand to hand. Their eyes calm, their posture disciplined, because this was not the end, only the opening. Commander, a woman named Lyra, paced the observation platform overlooking the control room, her uniform plain, her voice soft. When she finally spoke, she said, "Confirm all captures and begin psychological sequence phase 3." Her aides moved swiftly, unlocking protocols that had not been used in over a century, files stamped with red seals, marked with names of operations thought long buried. Among them were the words that had once frightened entire empire: Shost Echo Black Veil Dead Silent Sacris. The galaxy news began to spread not through official reports, but through fear. Survivors of the fleet, those who had ejected in time or who had hidden within escape pods, told stories. No one wanted to believe. These spoke of missiles that whispered before they struck, of music that played through walls, of strange voices reciting names of people the aliens had never met, but who seemed to know them, of weapons that did not destroy quickly, but shut systems down one by one until the ships were like coffins, floating through nothing. Most terrifying of all was what happened to those who were captured. Council security intercepted a video broadcast across encrypted channels. It was not sent to the public, only to those within the highest military levels. The video began with a view of a single alien soldier bound to a chair, his eyes wide, his body unharmed, and standing before him was a human, not in armor, not in a uniform, just a man wearing civilian clothes, his face calm, his voice gentle. "Tell me," he said, "do you remember when your leaders mocked us in the council chamber? Do you remember when they called us primitive?" The alien tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. The human continued with a small smile. "You thought silence meant weakness. But we were silent because we listened, because we learned, because we remember." Ed leaned closer, his eyes never blinking, and said, "Your fleet came to teach us a lesson. Now we will teach you how humans learned." The screen cut to black in council chambers. Panic grew. Some demanded retaliation, others begged for negotiation. But no one could reach Earth. Every attempt was blocked, rerouted, erased. By the time any message got through, the humans had already moved 3 steps ahead. Galactic markets collapsed under the weight of fear. Trade routes closed. Entire regions went dark. Entire sectors refused to send ships anywhere near human territory. Not because of official orders, but because no one wanted to wake the sleeping lion again. Earth was no longer the joke of the galaxy. It was the shadow under the bed, the whisper behind every door, the ghost that smiled before it struck. Inside another hidden facility, deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean, another set of prisoners was being processed. But this time not for torture or pain. The humans had a different strategy. They showed the captured aliens images not of war, but of history, of human children buried after battles, of cities rebuilt after being destroyed, of songs sung by survivors who had lost everything and yet still smiled. They showed them the face of humanity, not as a warrior but as a people that had endured more than any race could measure. Some aliens cried, others broke down and confessed military routes, locations, and secret council protocols, not because they were forced, but because they saw the truth. And the truth broke them back. On the council capital, the speaker finally called an emergency vote. Earth was to be declared an existential threat, emotion that had only ever been considered once in the entire history of the council, and even then, it had failed. But this time the vote passed. Earth was no longer seen as a planet of cowards. It was now a world of ghosts with knives of shadows and minds of steel, a race that had studied every insult, every betrayal, every dismissive glance, and forged them into weapons of silence. And now they had set their trap not just in space, but in the minds of every species, watching every leader, questioning every citizen, wondering if Earth was ever truly weak, or just waiting for the moment to Risu never forgot. The chamber where they kept him was quiet, not because of fear, but because of respect. The walls were gray, the light soft, and everything inside felt designed to unsettle without violence. There were no chains, no weapons, no threats, and yet, the alien general who once led part of the council fleet now sat with his head bowed, his breathing shallow, his thoughts racing through every mistake, every assumption that had led him here. Across from him sat the same human who had appeared in the video, the man who wore no uniform, the one who always smiled, not out of joy, but out of something deeper, older, a kind of patience that only comes from generations of silence. The human set down a simple object on the table between them, a rock, black and scorched, marked with old writing. The alien stared at it, confused, then flinched as the translation scrolled into his neural lens. "This is from Hiroshima." The human leaned back, his eyes never leaving the general, and spoke softly, calmly, not with anger, but with memory. That rock came from a place where humans learned what it meant to hold death in their hands and survive, where shadows were burned into walls and the sky turned to fire, and still people got up and lived and rebuilt. And remember. At a pause, then added, "We do not forget." The alien tried to speak, tried to form words of apology, of diplomacy, of logic, but none came. The human leaned forward again and said, "Your fleet was only the beginning. We let you come because we wanted you to see what waits for those who believe silence means surrender. You thought we sat in your councils because we were weak, but we listened, we learned, We watched every lie, every dismissal, every plan spoken behind closed doors. We recorded them all, and we waited. The alien asked then, why now? Why strike now after all these years? The human tilted his head and said, because now you are ready to see. In the Galactic Council, a storm raged, no longer the calm debates of politics, but raw fear. Ambassadors yelled over each other. Some demanded more fleets. Others begged to withdraw all influence from Earth systems entirely. Still others insisted on peace. But none could agree, because none could forget the look in the eyes of the few survivors from the failed attack. They spoke of human weapons that did not just kill, but disoriented, confused, whispered memories into their minds of battles they never fought, of fears they never faced, of guilt they did not own. Some suspected Earth had developed technology that could read minds. Others believed it was psychological warfare, centuries in the making. But all agreed on one thing: Earth had prepared. By one, systems began to pull away from the Council, not because they loved Earth, but because they feared being on the wrong side of whatever came next. Entire planets issued their own treaties to the human delegation, offering minerals, trade routes, even shared tech, just to avoid being part of any future retaliation. What they did not know was that Earth had no intention of waging full-scale war, because Earth had already won. Victory was not in ships or weapons, it was in fear and memory, in rewriting the definition of human in the minds of those who once saw them as prey on Earth. The people went about their lives unaware of the specifics, but knowing something had changed. Children laughed in schools, factories built more quietly than before, and satellites blinked in patterns that only a few would recognize. In secret rooms, human leaders met and discussed what came next. Not expansion, not conquest, but control. The kind that does not need to be enforced with violence, but maintained with reputation. A legend carved not in stone, but in silence. The old ambassador now returned from the shadows, addressed a small council of human strategists, his face still unreadable, his tone calm. He said, the galaxy has seen our shadow, let us now show them our light. By one, sleeper agents stationed across alien systems were given new orders: not to sabotage, not to destroy, but to guide, influence, correct. They would now work to shape the galaxy, not as victims, but as architects. A new symbol was released quietly across the stars, a hand holding a shattered chain. Beneath it, words translated in every known language. You remember who we are. In distant worlds, oppressed species began to rise, not in rebellion, but in thought. They started asking questions about Earth, about the humans who endured betrayal after betrayal, and yet survived, about the stories of humans who smiled in the face of death and turned silence into power. The fear of Earth began to shift, not into love, but into something more useful: respect. And in the chamber far from Earth, where the alien general still sat, the human finally stood, placed his hand on the rock, and said, we never asked to lead, but if you make us, we will lead in ways you never imagined. Then he walked away, leaving behind nothing but silence and memory, and one broken general who would never see the galaxy the same again. To Earth, Grand Hall of the Galactic Council was no longer a place of pride, it had become a space of unease. The golden banners that once waved high above each species now hung heavy, dull, as if burdened by the silence that filled the chamber. The seats were filled, but no one spoke, no laughter, no whispers, only glances of fear and uncertainty. Each delegate wondering what would come next, wondering if the old world of power and pride had finally collapsed. At the far end of the hall, where the human seat once remained empty, the doors opened slowly, not with a bang, but with a deep mechanical breath that echoed through the room. A figure stepped inside, not draped in royal garb, not accompanied by guards, just a single human walking calmly down the center aisle, his eyes locked on every face that had once looked down on his kind. It was the ambassador. But something had changed in him, or perhaps something had changed in the way others now saw him. He reached the central platform and stood in silence, his hands at his side. As he looked around the vast room of Empress, no introduction was given, no permission requested. He simply began to speak. You laughed when we bribed you, dismissed us. You stripped our moons, our minerals, our dignity. You thought our silence was weakness, our patience a flaw. You believed history would forget us. Turned slowly, letting his gaze fall on each section of the room. But we remembered every vote made without us, every deal signed over us, every insult thrown before us, and we endured, not because we had no power, but because we chose to wait. Sarkith, representative, stood briefly as if to challenge, but sat again. When the human's eyes met his, saw our weapons, the cycle. But what you did not see were our minds, our unity, our memory. You underestimated the power of a species that learns not from one lifetime, but from thousands, that burns its pain into books, songs, stories, into children raised not to hate, but never to forget. He raised one hand, and the chamber's holographic center activated, showing images of Earth's history, war after war, pain after pain. Pain recovery after recovery, humans standing over ruins smiling, not because they had won, but because they had survived. These are our monuments, not built of gold or crystal, but of fire and endurance. Seth hologram shifted, now showing images of council meetings across decades, clips of alien leaders mocking humans, delegating scraps to Earth, giving them empty titles and false respect, while carving deals behind their backs. Watched, we listened, and now you have seen what comes when the silent finally speak. A murmur rippled through the chamber, a sound of shifting chairs of pride folding into uncertainty. Ambassador lowered his hand. The images faded. We are not here for revenge. We are not here to destroy. We are here to offer truth. The truth is that Earth will no longer bow. Earth will no longer whisper. Earth will no longer be excluded from decisions that shape worlds. Paused, then said, "The council belongs to all species, but it will now answer to those who have earned their voice, not stolen it." A long silence followed, and then one by one, the unthinkable began. The representative of the Journalist Consulate rose first, bent slightly at the waist, a gesture of submission, followed by the Threllis, who removed their ceremonial crest and laid it at the human's feet, then the Halari, who raised their hands in the air, a symbol of respect in their culture. Not all stood, some remained frozen in pride or fear, but enough did that the message was clear. The council would never be the simulator that cycled. New laws were passed, treaties were rewritten, borders re-examined, and Earth was no longer a watcher. It became a cornerstone, a name spoken with caution, with care, with reverence. Back on Earth, the streets remained unchanged. Children still ran, laughter still echoed through parks, the stars still blinked above, quiet and unaware of it beneath that peace. History had turned in classrooms across the galaxy. New history books were written, ones that included Earth not as a footnote, but as a force, as a reminder that silence is not weakness and memory is not a burdensome. Say, the humans had planned it all from the beginning. Others believe it was instinct. But everyone agreed on one thing: when Earth finally stood, the galaxy had no choice but to both. Voice of Earth. Years passed since the day the council bowed. The galaxy moved on, but nothing was the same. From the ashes of fear grew a new kind of order, one shaped not by threats or blood, but by the weight of memory. Earth did not conquer it, inspired it, did not rule it, reminded. It became the quiet center of a loud universe, and in doing so it rewrote what power meant. In the deepest library on the planet, Helvar scholars studied ancient Earth texts, not to laugh at them as they once had, but to understand the force behind a species that refused to break. They read poems written in trenches, letters sent from burning cities, speeches whispered in darkness, and every word felt like a map, not of geography but of Sulan, a farming world near the edge of council space. A child looked up at the stars and asked his grandmother why the sky felt different now. She smiled gently and told him it was because the sky remembered too, because once a quiet planet stood up and every star turned to listen. The ambassador, who once walked alone into the great hall, now walked freely among alien cities, greeted with respect, never asked for, honored by those who once ignored him, not because he demanded it but because he proved it. Spoke rarely, and when he did, people listened, not for the strength in his voice, but for the silence between his words. And day he disappeared, no ship launched, no farewell given, only a single sentence left behind, carved into a stone deep beneath the surface of Earth. We're never weak, we were waiting, and above that stone a flame burns eternal, not in defiance but in memory, not to threaten but to promise that those who endure in silence can one day speak loud enough to change. A galaxy. This is not just the story of Earth, it is the story of every voice ever ignored, every soul ever dismissed, every whisper that waited long enough to become thunder. It is a story not of war, but of will, not of conquest, but of conviction, not of rage, but of remembrance. And when new worlds rise and new councils form, and new voices tremble at the edge of power, they will remember one name above all others: Earth. And